Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Amen, and joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed of New York City, and Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island. We are recording this today on Yom HaAtzmaut. We'll talk about that in a second. Day 221 of the war and the captivity of the hostage, praying always for their release and for their freedom, imagining the continued trauma and struggle that they and their families are going through, praying that they are in fact still alive. This makes this day very complicated, as we mentioned last week, even with Yom HaShoah coming up to Yom HaZikaron. These are complicated days this year, and we try as much as possible to understand Yagon v'simcha, Choshech or v'choshech. Last night in my shul, I did a little transition ceremony where we made the bridge between Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance, remembering the fallen, and especially this year with so many hundreds of new fallen soldiers, new names that have been added, and also understanding that there's still so much to be grateful for, that Israel, despite all the challenges, despite all of its blemishes, all its flaws, um, is remarkable. And I'm not sure if that's a good theme in terms of, but I'm just going to try this on you, which is mum, the idea of mum. Mum is an awkward Hebrew word. I don't even really know what the shorish of mum is, because it's mem vav mem. It's probably its own shorish. Mum means a blemish. Mum means a flaw. We're all flawed in some ways. Some of us have physical flaws, and some of us have flaws that are deep inside of us. But this Parasha Emor, does speak in some way of two categories of mumim: the category of the priests, these individuals that are deputized to serve in the tabernacle, later in the temple. And then, of course, we have a whole catalog of blemishes that make various sacrifices un, not available,
Unkosher.
not
Well,
kosher.
they exclude individuals from yeah.
They're exclusionary, and they are
They exclude
fine
both.
limits.
They exclude both an imperfection of the person offering and of the animal being offered.
All right.
Right. And I think that maybe part of the problem that some people may have is that they don't understand the symbolism. The reason why the sacrifice in the Kohen with the blemish is excluded is not because there's something intrinsically wrong with either one, but because of what it represents. When you approach God, you want to approach God holy, with both WH holy and HO holy. And you can't do that if something is defective.
Right. So is it for the person who, for the audience, or is it for the officiant?
I think it's the mega statement about one wants to say about how one worships God, that we want to do so with our whole being. And our whole being, by definition, cannot have blemishes. That's
Well,
So
taken
I would say about that, first of all, just marking out the difference in the contemporary temperament and the biblical temperament is, I would think that if I said that to almost anybody that I know nowadays, they would say, "Oh, au contraire, the opposite is true." That warts and all, and as the wonderful Midrash says, that if a person eats off cracked dishes and wears torn clothing, that's a ganai hulo, that's embarrassing to that person. But the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed Holy One, all of God's kelim are shaburim. All of God's vessels are broken. I think that the contemporary temperament says, accept people in all their brokenness. They do come WHOLLY. They do come holy, 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 as the Aretha Franklin song went, with their brokenness. I think it's kind of more for the audience, which is to say, my approach to this question about the relative perfection of the animal, the relative perfection of the officiant, is that in the temple or the tabernacle is supposed to represent life at its best. Like people in those world with very much less medical care and prenatal care, and there was just a whole ton more of injuries and brokenness. And I think that they understood that they understand that beauty was better than ugliness, and that health was better than illness, and so they tried to create in the tabernacle this zone where stuff worked, unlike the rest of the world where stuff didn't work. And so the audience to see a kind of a perfect person, the audience wants to watch George Clooney offer a beautiful animal, not not a schlepper offer a lame animal.
So this is where we all kind of have our moments of conflict, which is that these texts represent a certain aspirational ideal. On the one hand, on the other hand, I keep thinking in the practical application of this, which is, everybody's got their little blemish, yeah, and especially in antiquity. I mean, my con, I think, and not to be too personal, but I when I was 15 or 14 years old, I broke my leg. Okay, I broke my leg, and so I went as in a cast, and I have a little bump where I broke my leg. Okay, and we all have scars, and we all have scar tissue, and we all have bumps and bruises and cuts and other things. And my point is that, if you're going to look for someone who's perfect, you're going to disqualify a lot of people. On the one hand, I'm very glad I'm not a Kohen, because I would never be able to serve anyway. But I think I'd be disqualified because of that
Leg bumps? Of leg bumps?
Right.
I don't think leg bumps was on the list.
So, it's a mum, it's a
What a
blemish.
humpback
Okay,
is.
look, Jeremy, you're a Kohen. Okay, you're a Kohen.
And fortunately, a flawless one too.
Okay, so would you qualify?
You know, I take a little bit of comfort or whatever I mean, I'm a modern person. I get into that language of, all of us in our brokenness rather than all of us in a kind of presumed perfection. But I just think about the fact that almost everybody that you could possibly know, first of all, everyone you could possibly know is tameh. There is no chance. There is no chance
Absolutely.
of rectifying a kind of ritual purity, which is not an active category in Judaism outside the Beit HaMikdash, outside the temple. But we're all chayav karet for this or that. We're all subject to the penalty of excommunication for. Did anybody out there, even no matter how much of a good Jew they are now, did anybody ever like blow off Pesach? Okay, you're out of the Jewish people. Did anybody ever, do this or that? I can think of a bunch of things that make you chayav karet, and I kind of take some comfort in the thought that, okay, listen, the imperfection is all the way down. And so let's do our best. I feel like my religion is do our best rather than do the perfect.
Okay, so
I
you're
have
reading
to
this
take
aspirational.
exception.
Go ahead then, Barry.
Here I was thinking we were waiting for the Messiah, and now you're telling me we're waiting for the hand of God to punish us for our being chayav karet, which really throws me no end. But I think that we recognize that even though we have our blemishes, and one of the great lines of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is that there is nothing so whole as a broken heart. And I believe that, and I think it has a great deal of resonance. But on the other hand, we also know that there are times when we want to present ourselves at our best, as being close to perfect as we can. It's possible, for example, that one used a suit for kriya, for ripping. I highly doubt that someone who has ripped their suit in mourning for a relative is going to wear that at a big banquet honoring some famous person, because it doesn't quite sit well. And we all understand that the suit has meaning and the rent also has meaning, but in certain situations, we want an unblemished suit. And what I'd like to suggest, picking up what you were saying, Jeremy, about being modern, is that we have to really work out what our modernness means. So I'm reminded the Hebrew term for deaf mute is cheresh, which someone who was a deaf mute was unable to do certain things in Jewish law because according to the rabbis, that person could not communicate. So there's no way to know if that person had the requisite intelligence to do mitzvot. But a modern Orthodox rabbi who had personal experience with one of the categories, either a deaf person or a mute, said that this no longer applies because in our day, deaf mutes can communicate.
Mhm.
Most famously, Helen Keller. And that, so the category has changed because it no longer works the way it did for the rabbis, but we understand that their point is also an important part of our conversation.
Right. And I think every one of us would have, of course, do our utmost to accept everyone, regardless of whatever is impeding them from communicating or from ambulating or from and in any way. We've installed ramps in our shuls. We have all sorts of devices to help people. And I have to tell you, the most moving b'nai mitzvah that I've experienced as a rabbi have been for those kids who have some difficulties, some more severe, and who manage to come up to the bima or manage to do something to acknowledge this day. It's a remarkable moment to say, the the model has changed. There is no physical model of perfection, and I suppose we all have our blemishes, we all have our muma, and the lucky people are the people that are able to show their mums outside their physical blemishes.
We call that tattoos, but go ahead.
There are plenty of people. There are plenty of people that are blemished, really, quite blemished internally, and I think we might be in an era where there's actually more of that, especially among young people after the pandemic and during the pandemic.
So I just wanted to note about this though. Just go back to, what I initially proffered as this being about the audience. So I think that especially in Leviticus, maybe only in Leviticus, although whatever, we can think about some other examples. I think that I think that the Torah seems to think of ritual as a kind of art. And art does demand, a kind of excellence. If you go to a concert, you expect them to put on a really professional performance, and you don't expect them to say, come with all your brokenness and do your best. We don't think of shul any longer. I think we don't think of ritual worship any longer. We much prefer to say we want to include you in the way that's right for you, and we don't tend to think. Maybe some synagogues do tend to think, synagogues that are really highly polished performances. I don't say that disparagingly. I mean that they really do try to create, like my friend Angela Buchdahl at Central Synagogue, or Elliot Cosgrove in Park Avenue Synagogue, and Ozzy Schwartz there. They are creating an experience that is highly artful, and so in such a thing, you would say, listen, you really so and so. I want to include you, but you really sing very poorly, and so you can't lead the prayers this day.
Well,
Whereas in a shul that maybe mine or yours or whatever, it's much more important to say, even if it's not beautiful, we want to include you in the right way for you. And I think that I think that is a gap, just a difference. And it's not. I'm not ruling that this is true. I think that is a difference between the classical expectation that this is done perfectly because we're going for perfection, and the nowadays that says, on our own terms.
look, I think it's such a great kind of conversation because I'm sure you and I have experienced this probably more than once, where you're among the congregation, and someone is singing a different melody with a
Usually
different
that's me, so.
in a different key, and so it's painful sometimes, and so you want to say, I step back from it and go, like, this is the joyful noise that's going up to God, and who am I and what am I, and do I feel tremendously blessed that I can sing on key, but do I really know that if I am, I'm not a trained voice, etc., etc., and we're all imperfect creatures. But what you said before, I mean, it's interesting because those have become the gold standards. I know for many people, they tune in on Shabbat, they zoom into these synagogues for the performance aspect of it, and there is an aesthetic part of our religious experience. It's undeniable. It's one thing to walk into a matnas or a shelter or a kind of gymnasium, as many synagogues are in their formation in their early stages, or maybe in their permanent stages. And it's another thing to walk into one of these classic, beautiful synagogues, such as the Anshe Chesed or Park Avenue. These built in the beginning of the century, last century, with exquisite architecture and a certain kind of aesthetic and an aim to enhance the religious experience through aesthetics. And yeah, what you're saying is, we didn't come here to listen to just anybody. We wanted to listen to Kuzevitzky. We wanted to listen to, the mega all-star, and have our religious experience. We want to go when we want to go to shul. We want to go to hear Jan Pierce at the Met, and that will take us. And you know what? If you are hoarse or sing off key, that's your blemish, and that's not going to work. And we demand a certain standard. So there's what to say for that. And yet, on the other hand, there's the rest of us, um, and I think that we all live in that space, because most of us are not Jan Pierce. There was
Even
Even
Jan
even to
Pierce
the even
isn't
to the
Jan
extent
Pierce
the other way
anymore.
that the Hamish quality, of like a chavura-ish kind of event, is seen as much more meaningful, in many cases. Like,
sure.
I went to a Jazz at Lincoln Center event, and I didn't notice this even, but the guy told me that, Wynton Marsalis is the like
Director.
the director. Although he, like, that day he was just one of the players, and the guy who was, one of the other players was sort of being the MC, and this guy knows at the event, and he said, "Did you see the part where the drummer lost the beat?" I said, "No, I totally missed that." He said, "Wynton Marsalis kind of got him back on the beat," and I thought to myself, "Wow, like the people who can do this just at a superior level. When you go to Jazz at Lincoln Center, you want it to be, art. You don't. Yeah,
Well,
that's
not
just
only that, but you've paid real money for that,
yes.
and you're not gonna.
As opposed to synagogue dues.
Well,
That's monopoly money.
exactly. No, but your expectation from the synagogue is not performance necessarily.
So I want to come back to something that Jeremy said about the blemishes. And I was thinking while you were talking, Jeremy, that many of the blemishes that attend to the priest or the animal are visual. And visual blemishes can detract from what we see. And it may be that those blemishes are the ones that call attention to exclusion or being disqualified, whereas other blemishes that would not be visible might be allowed to pass.
Well, there are physical ones. I'm not sure about the leg bump, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah. I mean, look, to be sure I'm right. Some of them are clearly, first of all, some of them you lose your Kohen's. First, there's the ritual impurity of being the dead body. There's the kind of sexual abstemiousness. You can only marry certain. Kohen Gadol has a more restricted, and the Kohen Hediot, the general Kohen has some restriction, but some of these things in the list are visible, but they include some genital stuff. You don't want to be Maroach Ashech. That's what I'm just saying. Nobody wants to be Maroach Ashech, and that would be visible if you weren't wearing pants, but maybe if you not if you
We're gonna have to tell
If
our
you were
listeners
dressed.
and viewers to look that up. All right,
Well, but then we end up with this, what to me is this wonderful anomaly. So I used to go to a shul where one of the Kohanim who would be called as a Kohen was married to a convert, and his children would be called up as Kohanim also.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like sometimes people want to have it both ways, because we're now calling up as a Kohen someone who could not have served as a Kohen in the temple, which to me makes absolutely no sense.
okay,
If
so
we're going to
maybe
preserve the classical hierarchy, then we preserve the classical hierarchy. I don't know that we can modernize it.
well, let me ask then the
Well, we
question,
can
which is,
modernize anything.
should we in fact preserve this? I stumble into this all the time, which is okay, we all present an egalitarian community, but that comes right up against the idea that there are different privileged classes in Judaism, of which you represent one, Jeremy Cohen, and I represent the least privileged class among the people, and so does Barry here.
Conservative rabbi?
We are Israelites.
Intellectuals.
We're ordinary Israelites. We can't eat truma. We don't have access. I mean, even me with my bump on my knee, I probably couldn't kneel.
I mean, technically, of course, I mean, I get what you're saying, Barry, about the sort of like promiscuous, like having your cake and eating it too, and what's the phrase? Wanting it both ways. I get that, but I do think that we do modernize things all the time, and we make metaphors out of things that in the Bible were not metaphoric, that were practical. So just to be really clear, I couldn't eat truma either. I mean, we're all safek Kohanim at best nowadays.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, no, because I think you have to understand that if the temple existed, that fake would disappear.
presumably
I mean, you
they
can't
would.
recreate a new world and think it's going to be exactly like the
Well,
old
wait
one.
a second. Actually, I really don't know. I mean, what would they do? Because
But you're a fake Kohen too. I mean, but
one is a Safek Kohen, just like presumptively, but by doubt. There's like two different kinds of what's the word? There's two different kinds of Safek. There's the thing that I don't know, and the thing that is unknowable. Like there is no way we can all go back and run the lineage tree. Yeah, so
Well, we soon will be with artificial intelligence. You could do a DNA test, Jeremy, and connect to whatever database there is that links up with all of the Kohanim. I go out on a limb here and say that within the next 10, certainly 20 years, we'll have enough capacity to link up genetically a lot of people. They're already doing that. In some ways, Holocaust victims with facial recognition software. It's amazing what you can see on some of these websites, the YIVO website, the Yad Vashem website. There's extraordinary work that's being done with artificial intelligence to connect people to each other, to make family trees, and to give the genetic lineages.
right. But there's a kind of, my mother of blessed memory used to say, after second cousins, you're just friends.
good line. Good line.
If every time there's a new president, there's a little article about how so far he is related to all the other presidents.
Yeah.
And I think Obama and Bush
Or
were ninth cousins.
Yeah.
Which means that they have less than one gene in common.
I certainly hope that the previous president isn't related to George Washington.
No, look, come on, but we'll find out that the three of us are related somewhere. We're probably 9th, 10th cousin.
Oh, wait, so for first cousin shares a grandparent, second cousin shares a great grandparent. So ninth cousins would share a great grandparent. Yeah, that's funky.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't, I don't really like this DNA business. I don't, I really, I feel like Judaism is just cultural, and the DNA thought that you can identify it. I will say this though, the Kohen thing, my shul does not do Kohen Aliyah. I don't really mind that. I don't care. But I definitely want to give Birkat Kohanim.
Right,
So
but I think that's different.
Whenever I'm in Israel,
no, you said that before, and I think we've always kind of invoked the name of Rabbi Neil Gilman when we have this conversation. Who said very similarly to you. I understand, but viscerally and emotionally, I feel connected. And so let me ask you to explain that the emotional valence of your lineage is actually quite powerful to you.
it is. How shall I say this? Well, I could imagine that this would work for anybody, and not because I have a self-conception of Kohanic priestly lineage. But the fact is that just by nature of the lineage draw, I have a normative practice that I'm saying, Asher Kichanu Bikidusha Toshel Aaron, blessed are you, Master of the world. You sanctified us with Aaron's holiness, Vitzivanu Levarech et Amo Yisrael Be'ahava, and you commanded us to bless the people lovingly. And there's this thing, you have that hand gesture, it's Vitzivanu Levarech et Amo Yisrael Be'ahava, and you kind of open up your hands at the Be'ahava. And to me, it is just this gesture of opening the hands, which is like a gift you're giving to somebody. And it's like opening up the heart, opening up the channel of blessing. So I really have this feeling when I get there. And because it's always, almost always, I do it in Israel. I mean, sometimes for whatever reason, I won't be in Anshe Chesed on a Shalosh Regalim or something. Because I'm often in Israel, like when I was in Israel in November, it was less than 30 days from October 7th. And here I am with these people in these, little Orthodox synagogues in Rehavia. And I just felt so like they needed my bracha, and I was given my bracha, and I was the channel for the divine bracha. It was an overwhelming feeling of being a tzinor, being a.
That's what we're talking about.
Right, but
Absolutely.
I think the other part of the discussion is that, at least the way I understand it, and I think your explanation confirms it, in the priestly blessing, the Kohen is an agent for God.
It's
God is blessing the people through the vehicle of the Kohen. And it's hard to
confusing.
imagine a a blessing of the congregation that did not involve the Kohen that would be acceptable to the masses. So that it can't really be replaced. But with the Aliyah, and I don't mean to knock Kohanim, some of my best friends are Kohanim, Jeremy. That the Kohen gets the first Aliyah is kind of self-serving. It's for that person.
Well, it's interesting because there's two different things, right? There's two different explanations for the, halachically speaking. There's a mitzvah in the Torah this week, Vikidashto, and the people are told that you have to treat the Kohen with sanctity. And in some of the renderings of the Taryag mitzvah of the 613, that is a mitzvah, and giving the Kohen these privileges, like you always do when we say Birkat Hamazon, you tab me to be the Zimon. And that is taken by some halachic authorities to be a mitzvah deoraita, Torah legislative thing, that you have to defer to these people on sort of caste lines. But then the Gemara in Gittin famously says, why does the Kohen get the first aliyah? Because people fight about it. And if you just like designate that the first one goes to the Kohen, there'll be fewer fighting about who gets the privilege.
Right, because what would they fight about? Who the smartest person was.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting. You have those two incompatible explanations. One, this is the spiritual hierarchy of the community. Two, let's just try and make this work a little bit less poorly than it usually works.
I revert back to your not nostalgia, but the sentimentality of the blessing, and that's a real part of it. In the experience of receiving the blessings of Kohanim on many occasions, it's been that kind of conveyance that these individuals, they're no better, no worse than anybody else. But there's something just a little special. There's a little tint to their lives because they carry this tradition, and many of them do take it seriously. And because of that, it doesn't necessarily always reflect in their comportment, but it does reflect in the sense that they have this privilege and that they understand that. And that, I guess, I just watched the Seinfeld. He
Pop
said,
tart?
no, he gave a little address at Duke University. He said, we've been taught to be ashamed of our privilege and proud of our shame. We should be proud of what of our privileges. We should really take that to heart. And so, Jeremy, you're a Cohen. It's a privilege, and we're honored to know you. I feel no, the truth is I couldn't think of anybody else I would want to pidyon the ben, to redeem, or if we were ever so lucky to have you among us on one of those occasions when a Birkat Kohanim is done, which we do in my shul.
Should be so
Uh,
lucky. We should be so lucky. I'd be honored. And V'samu et shmi al bnei Yisrael v'ani al
Amen,
bnei.
amen. And that would be great. Well, we've gone from blemishes to what makes us whole. And what makes us whole is a blessing. I think this is a blessing. And we want to offer our blessing to our viewers and our listeners. Thank you so much for spending the time with us this Parsha Talk. We are thinking about everybody, the Klal Yisrael, Yom Ha'atzmaut this year, difficult time, and hoping for Besorot Tovot, for good news always, for
Amen.
nechama, for comfort,
Amen.
and for blessing. And our blessing to you, Shabbat Shalom. See
Shabbat
you next
shalom.
week on Parsha Talk. Bye-bye.